Thank you guys for coming to our session. My name is Erin Foote-Morgan. I'm the Executive Director of Bend 2030. We worked with about 1 in 7 people in Bend in 2005 to create a vision for the future of Bend that we wanted to accomplish by 2030, kind of like community strategic planning. And now we work on major issues like housing and transportation and that stand in the way of achieving that vision. And I am here today because our organization really exists to engage people like you to shape the future of this city. And I'm very pleased to introduce these folks that are about to come up and talk with you, because we have an opportunity right now with 2 major processes in our city to truly launch a new future of sustainability for Bend. And these guys are going to tell you a little bit about how OSU Cascades and the recent UGB proposal are really accelerators towards building a more sustainable future for our city. So I'm going to let them come up and tell you about it, and then I'll help us do a little Q&A and a little community conversation towards the end of the session. So with that, I'll turn it over to John Skidmore, Assistant City Manager at the City of Bend, who's been overseeing the UGB proposal process.
Thanks, Erin. Okay, so Nathan Moses is the fourth behind the posters that some folks can't see. So I am the Assistant City Manager, but really my background is land use planning. So as I like to say, I'm a bit of a recovering planner. So as we dive into, we kind of have a top 10 list of items that we're doing in Bend between our urban growth boundary proposal as well as the OSU campus that I think contribute to a more sustainable approach to urban living. There's a great planner, writer, academic. His name is Peter Calthorpe. He has a great book. It's called Urbanism in the Age of Climate Change. It's by Island Press, if you're looking for something to read about and how all these things work together. I do highly recommend it. There's a couple quotes in here that I think kind of tee us off quite nicely. The first is about the past 50 years of development throughout the United States. Our cities and towns have been on a high carbon diet, and our metropolitan regions have become, in short, obese. Oil is like a high sugar and high starch diet for cities. It expands the waistline without nourishing strength or resilience. Urban neighborhoods are like healthy diets. They build on unique places and local history. They use natural ingredients and mix them well. They tend toward local sources, and they are lean. America's post-war suburbs are like fast food. Their history and sense of place trumped by mass production. Their ingredients dominated by a few generic staples. Their resources distant and large, and their infrastructure highly subsidized. Our urban footprint, its physical size and resource demands, has expanded in unsustainable ways for way too long. What we're doing here in Bend is really transitioning from, I would say, more of a suburban community to more of a community that is going to accommodate a lot of growth, relying on some concepts of urbanism. Obviously, it's going to rely on a lot of balancing between what folks might phrase as livability and impacts to their lifestyle, but I think urbanization for a city that's growing so quickly will help us reduce our collective footprint. Another great quote, regarding cities on a per capita basis, they require less land, less auto travel, and less energy. They emit less carbon. One more that I thought was pretty interesting. The good news is that truly great urban places also happen to be the most environmentally benign form of human settlement. So, as we move forward as a community, I think there's a lot of things we need to keep in mind as we balance, but one of the biggest pushes for our UGB is that 70% of the growth that we're going to see in the next 12 years will be accommodated within our existing UGB, so we're not really looking to expand by a huge degree. I guess 2 things I'd like the folks in this room to walk away with from at least my portion of the presentation. We're in Oregon, we're a city in Oregon. We don't have the opportunity to say, no thank you, we don't want to grow. By state law, we're required to plan for 20 years of growth, and we need to plan our lands to be able to accommodate that. So we can't limit building permits, we can't we just can't say no. And I think Mayor Clinton did a much more eloquent job of summarizing that in one of the last few hearings, but we just don't have the opportunity to prevent growth from coming to Bend. And with that in mind, I think the most environmentally sensitive and probably appropriate response is to urbanize in specific areas throughout the town where we'll be able to absorb that growth in a manner that doesn't really detract from what we all have come to know and love about Bend. So my top 5 of what we're doing, first through the urban growth boundary expansion, 30,000 new people over the next 12 years. That's basically 7 people a day. We've grown by approximately 6.5 people a day since 1990. So we continue to see a fast pace of growth. We're really focusing a lot of our growth in transit corridors, which are highlighted in orange here. So we haven't adopted all of the code language that would allow urbanization and more density within all of those corridors, but the encouragement is there and the policy intent is there, and so as things develop, you will see some zone changes that would permit these types of things. And urbanization and transit success are kind of a chicken and the egg. You need a certain level of density for transit to be successful. You need a certain level of transit service for density to really work the way you'd like it to. In Bend, I would say that we have a relatively anemic transit system, and it's really to no fault of Central Oregon Intergovernmental Council's fault. I would say that it's really more of the way the community has chosen to piecemeal the funding of it. Typically for successful transit districts, you'll see them having the ability for sustainable funding through a taxing district as well as payroll taxes in the region. We have neither. So COIC is going to the state legislature this coming winter, and they will be working with the legislature to allow them to create a taxing district, which they currently can't do by state law. So up on the top left, that's from Portland in Fairless Square, kind of near the mall. A lot of activity, job opportunities, places to live, things to do, places to eat, just a lot of vibrancy. And typically the transit there is relatively well used because people can rely on it to get to the things that they want. I thought this was a great picture from somewhere in the UK. You know, sticking a bus stop out in the middle of some rural area typically doesn't have much of a return on investment, and it's extremely expensive to operate, and it really doesn't really work well for a suburban community. Typically, if you have more activities along the transit routes and more amenities that people want to get to, I think the quicker you'll be to hop on a bus to get over to 27th versus maybe driving or some other way. So you will see along those major corridors a change in the style of development and most likely in a more urban form. Oops. The second in the top 5 is we are changing our development codes to really encourage compact development, especially in the core area. So the core area is this blue and red dashed outline here with, I would say, the outcome resulting in more Franklin crossings versus more single-family detached homes that's spreading your population and limiting your ability for mixing uses. So Franklin Crossing has, I have no idea how many companies now, but gyms, companies, retail space, coffee shops. My father-in-law happens to live up above. It's a fantastic mixed-use example right downtown. I think that works really well. It used to be, anybody remember the old Lumbermen's Insurance Company that used to be there? It was a squat little one-story building. So I think, and a large parking lot, which we'll get to in a moment. So these other examples are, that's Division Street, Southeast Portland. That's Killingsworth, Northeast Portland. I lived in Portland for quite a while. When I lived there, Southeast Division Street was, again, single story, pretty, not desolate, but now you actually see a lot of urban scale development, a lot of mixed use, a lot of cool restaurants. You can see people are waiting out in front to get in. So you're seeing the vibrancy that, you know, kind of comes along with providing the mix of uses in areas that are well served by transit, that people can walk. And lo and behold, you have so many people having a good time, they decide to have a street fair out in front. So You will see development codes throughout Bend, especially in that core area, that will encourage that type of use. So this is from the Central West Side Plan project that we worked on with OSU Cascades. But here are some renderings of how compact development can encourage kind of a different approach, especially to transportation. So we're looking south on Century Drive. I just rode my bike up there last week. Not a super great place to walk or bike, but with a little bit of public investment, whoops, come on. Nice streetscape, wider places to walk, safe and buffered bike lanes, safe crossing areas, just an enhanced pedestrian and bike environment, along with development codes that allow more urban style development. You actually have more uses that people want to get to, and they don't necessarily need to hop on in a car to get there. So with this style of development, you'll have more employment opportunities, additional shopping opportunities, places for people to live up above. And again, you are going to be much more, I would say, the odds are much more in the favor of people actually walking and biking in this environment versus the auto-dependent, auto-oriented development scheme that we have currently. And so a little public investment followed by private development, and then here's kind of what it looks like. Who knows if that's going to be in our lifetime, but the ability for this type of scale of density really not only encourages that bike and ped use, but it also enables a truly sustainable transit district to operate and move people to the places they want to get to. Okay, number 3 on our UGB. In 2009, I want to say it was 2010, when the city approached the state for our first urban growth boundary expansion. I believe the expansion was somewhere around 8,500 acres. The city of Bend is roughly 22,000 acres, so that's almost a third. This time around, it's less than 2,400, so almost 10%. So it's a pretty small expansion for the areas, and that's what these yellow areas on the exterior of the yellow UGB line is. But more importantly, this time around, what's going to be required in each of those expansion areas are area plans for some of them, but in all of them, a master plan that will show how you're going to blend the mix of uses planned for those areas in a way that isn't just going to, I guess, facilitate suburban sprawl of detached single-family residential units. You're going to have commercial areas, you're going to have employment areas, you're going to have schools and parks, and then you're also going to be required to provide a mix of housing, which we'll get into in a minute. But right now, Bend is developed with about 70% of our residential units are single-family detached. Moving forward, master plan areas will be required to have at most 55% detached single-family with 45% more or less of attached housing. So again, you're kind of forcing a blend of housing that doesn't exist now, which would better meet our diverse economy and employment. You'll also see a mix of uses, parks, restaurants, different types of housing, and the compact nature of it really does limit impact on like the deer winter range habitat west of town. And so I think with this UGB, watch your eyes, okay. I think you're going to have a hard edge in terms of the development on the west side. You might see a couple rural residential, maybe 5 acre, 10 acres, and there's some private land left out there. But for the most part, I would say for at least the next few generations, this is going to be kind of the hard edge of the west side of Bend. Again, I think that's a benefit, and it does protect habitat that is just west of town, and it's also forcing a development style that's been really successful up in Northwest Crossing. I mean, having access to parks, restaurants, schools, safe place to ride your bike, safe place to walk, close to town. I think the market's reacted very well. And you don't have many of those examples throughout town unless you go to kind of the historic areas like downtown. You have your services, and you have some really nice residential areas next to those. Those types of developments, I think, will always be popular, and the market will always demand them. We just, as a country, kind of got away from that for a while. This is 15th and Knott Road. So currently you can see there's not a whole lot going on out there. And this is what the plans, you could realize with the plans that we have in place. There needs to be a certain amount of rooftops for that to work. I was working with a coworker on this, and someone joked, you know, geez, why are you going to show that example? It's going to take forever and a day for that to happen. Well, Northwest Crossing looked like that 15 years ago. It just wasn't vacant. They had trees. So, you know, the market does catch up, and when you have a good plan in place, the market tends to react, and you see these things start to develop. I will say Northwest Crossing's commercial area is really now just starting to pick up over the past 4 or 5 years, but it's working, and it's. I lived there for 14 years. I walked to dinner on Friday night. It was great. Number 4, required mix of housing. As I mentioned, Bend has about a 70-30% split of housing. You've got 70% detached single-family housing. You've got about 30% attached. And I was speaking with one of the brokers. Our average sales price for a home now is roughly $400,000. I was speaking with our regional economist. The median household income is less than 60, so like 57, 58. That math doesn't work very well. On top of it, if you don't want to buy a place and you want to rent a place, we have a vacancy rate of less than 1%. So all around, housing, as we all know, is a very real problem in Bend. And I guess since we are in Oregon, and we went through our UGB process, we are required to do our Goal 10 planning, which is housing. And what we're really required to do is require a selection of housing based on the variety of incomes that we see. Yes, there's a lot of folks who make a good amount of money in Bend, but yes, we're also a tourist-based economy as well, so you've kind of got incomes that span the gamut. We are kind of in the missing middle. We don't really have much between high-end single-family detached, and really I don't even know if we have mid-rise, but maybe Franklin Crossing does qualify for that. But duplexes, triplexes, courtyard housing, smaller apartments, you don't see a whole lot of those going up. We currently have about 1,200 units of multifamily housing going up. That is kind of in the larger complex formats, but you don't see kind of these things, smaller offices with an apartment or two above. And so I think you're going to start to see those things fill in. And again, it's the intent is to meet that income spectrum that we had to provide housing for folks who can't afford the $400,000. So code requirements will provide for that type of development, where in the past it really has just been the single family detached. Our local development community has done a great job with it, but it's time for them to adjust. And one of the things that I'm going to watch with a lot of interest over the next 5 to 10 years is who in the development community is able to make those adjustments to keep up with the market, as well as keep up with the policy intent of the UGB. There's still always going to be room for a single-family detached, but I'm kind of excited to see who comes up with the next Franklin Crossing and which developers have the chutzpah to figure it out. So, we'll show you a video in a moment. I think for our community, what's going to help us urbanize is reducing our parking requirements significantly. Currently, we have a very suburban set of parking regulations that really do overpark most commercial developments, colleges, stores downtown, and there's so much parking required, you're reducing the space that could be put to use for commercial development, retail development, office, and it all comes back to some reliance on transit. So there's all this balancing act, but we have a pretty old set of parking requirements, and if the news stories I was watching over the weekend about the college are any indication, I think this is probably going to be one of the harder things for folks in Bend to adjust to is, you know what, you're not going to be able to pull up to Deschutes Brewery at 5:30 on a Friday night and be able to park in front and get a table. You're probably not going to be able to get a table, and you're definitely not going to be able to park in front. So it's that kind of adjustment. As we grow up as a town with 7 new people coming every day, there are certain things that you're just going to need to adjust to. We have a parking garage, it's very rarely full, and it's really easy to ride your bike downtown and get back. So let's see if I can. Oh. Come on. Would it help if I do it from
Give it a try.
And this is from our friends in Ottawa, Canada. Let's see here.
Where's your start? Is it down the bottom left?
It's bottom left. Let's see here. Help me out here.
Or why 5 years?
Oh, is that it? All right, looking for any millennials in the audience. Seeing any?
End the show and then go on to the web.
End the show.
End the show? All right.
You can press this too to get to end show.
Show. Let's do this here.
Yeah, then you can minimize it and bring up the other.
Can I pick up the internet here?
Yes, you
Yes.
should be able to.
Right, we're already connected.
This is a good one. Sorry to be eating into your time, Casey.
That'll be fun.
Now we're gonna sacrifice a little coffee break. I'm accustomed to that.
Not good.
There's a lot of anticipation here.
If you were watching it, it's super great.
That was how to find it when we were at home.
Have to teach them how to link it in the slideshow.
That looks familiar. There we go, thank you guys.
There's this. And of course the sound won't work. Okay, so in any event,
This is new.
I can send this on to.
Unmute it. It's muted.
No, it's okay.
Maybe that looks good
It does
now.
have subtitles.
Oh, we got it, I
Just
think.
end every sentence with
Okay,
a.
tribal zoning. Or you could with the parking.
There we go. Hey,
It's working.
All right, because the little 60s flashback at the beginning is the best part.
When you build something in Ottawa, the zoning bylaw says you have to include a certain amount of parking. But a lot of those standards haven't changed since the 1960s. Look at our most unique urban neighborhoods like Pentonburg and the Glebe. They were built back before we had those rules. But you couldn't even build those places today because you'd have to provide so much parking to comply with the zoning. You could with the parking underground, and some developments do. But that's expensive, and it means the building has to be bigger. Maybe a lot bigger. Some big cities now require much less parking than Ottawa does. Our current parking standards make it hard to start and grow a small business. Plus, parking takes up a lot of space that can be used for other things. This lot here, it's big enough to park up to 20 cars. Or you could build apartments for up to 20 people instead. Here's the thing. When you decide that all development has to have lots of parking, it creates an environment that's really difficult to walk in, bike, or transit. So naturally, everyone ends up driving. That means traffic. But it doesn't have to be that way. We're building light rail and bike lanes and neighborhoods where people can walk instead of having to drive everywhere. That means a more livable city, more choices, less traffic, and less need for parking. It's not the 60s anymore. Ottawa's growing up. It's time our parking rules did too. We want to know what you think.
Let's ensure if this thing's working here. So, Casey. I short circuited everything there.
You might have to switch the controller back over.
Yeah, so, in any event, parking, lots of parking. I'm gonna give you both of those. Okay. Lots of parking requirements can be a self-fulfilling prophecy. So again, as a community, I think we're gonna need to adjust to that, but I do think that if we had more appropriate parking standards for our growing community, you'd actually realize a lot of the urbanization we're trying to achieve. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Casey, and hopefully his AV works better than mine.
All right. Well, with that introduction from John, I want to just talk a little bit about how OSU Cascades is working towards accomplishing some of these strategies and putting them into place, and how that can help kind of reduce everybody's impact together. So we came up with our top 5 things that we're doing, hopefully to contribute to the sustainable west side of Bend at least, and maybe impacting the entire community. Overall, what I've been working on at OSU Cascades is a transportation demand management program. And so the goal there is, well, as it says, managing demand, but by encouraging other uses or other modes of transportation. So similar to the Ottawa example, if we have people getting out of their cars, getting onto bikes and things like that, we can get them to campus and minimize our impacts. So we're doing a variety of things to support that. A bike share program. It's called company's called Zagster. We have 30 bikes at 3 stations, kind of a half mile apart, to serve our campus community. And excited to say that that's expanding, and hopefully we'll have some stations downtown, maybe in the old mill here by springtime. So also creating public opportunities to reduce auto trips by getting them on bikes. They don't have to maintain them or anything, just join the bike share program as a member. We've also got a couple zip cars on campus, and the goal there is that students, staff, faculty can come to campus on the bus, they can walk, they can take their bike, but maybe they have a doctor appointment across town. They can grab a zip car and rent that by the hour. So they don't need to own the car, they just need a valid driver's license, and I think even 18-year-olds, college students can grab those. So that's great. We have 2 of those on campus right now, and actually those are open to the public as well. So if you know anybody on our side of town that doesn't own a car or just needs to borrow one for a short time, those are there. And then we're looking at setting up some van pools, working with the commute options folks to partner with other local employers to bring some of our students, some of our faculty down from Redmond, put them on a van with other local employees. Commuting from Redmond is probably the best, the first location, maybe from Lapine in the future, but grouping people up in that van and minimizing our impacts that way. And then, well, it sounds like I'm an expert or something there. Transportation consultations with me. But the idea is I've been thinking a lot about how we can get people to campus without driving their car alone. So we're really encouraging all the students and staff, if they have never tried to bike to campus or if they've never tried other options, come talk with me, and I'm making myself available to them to help out. We're then kind of also balancing out incentives and disincentives. So we found that if you just offer the carrot of an incentive, students may, some will probably appreciate that. They'll maybe shift their behavior, but some need that disincentive of parking, so they'll have a fee to park on campus. And so if you read the news, we'll say we're still working out kind of that balance there. I guess I can't say we could have nailed it in the first week, so give us a few weeks here. We're working on it, but hopefully find some balance, and then continue to promote those incentives, reward the behavior that we're trying to encourage, and hopefully shift that over time. So all of that really kind of goes hand in hand, having mixed-use zoning near campus, and so this is a lot of what John was talking about. If we have mixed-use zoning on the west side of Bend in the campus area, then it makes it a lot easier for someone to live near campus and be able to access, groceries, other services they need nearby. With our on-campus housing, this is really great because it might bring businesses near the campus that could support those students living on campus, and just again minimizing the number of auto trips for those short, I just need to go grab something at the store, or I need a drugstore trip, or whatever that might be. So promoting that on the west side of Bend, and we said we'll talk about this example a little bit later, but the west side plan really helps to support that, and some of the, again, that video that John shared, it was worth the time, John.
Sorry.
It gave me some illustrations. So, some of those 3-story buildings up at the street front, that could be a good example of this. And the West Side plan, I think, supports that and helps us bring that closer to reality. Yeah, and again, having all those services nearby just helps us provide other options to get there without a vehicle. And last but not least, we've really tried to focus some of the student fees being invested in CET, as well as the university contributing towards CET financially, as opposed to setting up our own shuttle systems. We really wanted to see that go into CET that serves the surrounding communities as well. So our goal there, provide a good option. Right now we're providing 30-minute headways up to COCC, which I heard in 1 week we had over 500 trips on Route 12, which was really good considering I think it was close to 100 a week prior to the campus opening. So a 500% increase, which is pretty exciting. And we're doing more, again, with those incentives to try and continue to encourage behavior in that direction. And again, as we think long term, a lot of you heard about the campus expansion. We have a lot of opportunity there. Maybe that creates an opportunity for a West Side transit hub. So really excited about that potential. And again, all this land use, mixed use zoning helps support all of these things. So I'll introduce Nathan Moses again. Nathan, what's your title with the university side?
Community Outreach Coordinator.
Yeah, so Nathan is great working with the community, and he's got a little more background about other things we work on.
Yeah, and this is where I get jazzed about, because this is when we start talking about how sustainability comes into our academic programs, but also how we're building the university. So I think looking at renewable energy sources tied in with the educational mission, we have sustainability and innovation as parts of what's driving us forward. So that means we're looking at ways in which we can use solar and biomass for energy uses for the campus. But that's also meaning not only providing resources for the campus, that's also incorporating in our current and future academic programs. That could be dashboard utilities in our new residence halls that show how people are using electricity and water in those facilities. So we're trying to be cutting edge in how we're moving forward with integrating those concepts into not only our physical development, but some of our program design as well. And everything that we kind of look forward to going forward with the initial development of the 10-acre site and beyond is looking at kind of this three-legged stool, as our leadership team likes to talk about for the sustainability development model, of considering social, environmental, and economic components and what makes sense for us programmatically. And that could be everything from the bike share program that Casey's talking about to the actual construction of a facility that we're doing and how we're managing what, maybe we're using solar panels for that facility, but we're not something, another piece of it is not being incorporated into it. So all these things have to be weighed in, and we're kind of have a dedicated effort of doing so, of looking at this model in our development. Oh, I forgot the clickers over here. And the other one too is, again, running joke is, people in Bend have talked about the location of the site and whether you agree or disagree with where it's at. For us, it came down to a really big pro-con list of why this site for the current 10-acre site and our future expansion really works. And for us, some of those things are the intentionality behind allowing for shorter trips and multimodal options for the site of our current 10-acre site. You've got a number of different resources around, and that site really perpetuates the ability to kind of develop some of those other transportation means for our students, staff, and faculty, and the community that we want to bring into the site. Looking at closer proximities to other amenities and potential partnerships. So looking at where that location helps us with providing recreation opportunities for our students, staff, and faculty. Student employments and internships. With the developing corridors in there, you've got a lot of need for employers basically saying, like, we want your students to come and work for us. Well, we just provide an opportunity for them to get there with a quarter-mile bike ride. That's something that's very, very valuable to the students and the employers alike. And then looking at shopping areas and other commercial entities. The other thing is, too, for our site, and looking at a sustainable focus for the site selection, is we've already got an area where you've got infrastructure for power, sewer, and transit already. Some of the sites didn't lead to that quite as well, and that's a whole larger discussion as far as funding for the site. But that's a huge consideration of why the university picked this particular area for the site. I'll pass it.
I think we'll
Yeah,
skip
You
this
want
part.
to skip and
Yeah.
questions?
Yeah, I think we'll go straight to questions and start out just by asking, did you guys learn anything from this? Were these new approaches to the UGB and the OSU that you hadn't heard before?
connects the dots.
kind of connects the dots, right? It's a real change in the way we've developed in Bend before. Question for any of these three guys out here. We'll start with you back there in the blue.
One of my questions is, I'm just looking at what I've seen around the country in terms of communities that develop affordability, and I've heard, in fact, I just came back from Las Vegas, about Bend, and it's getting too expensive to live here. And that's coming from folks in Las Vegas. And I recall maybe 3 or 4 months ago, Bend was number 3 in the United States in terms of increasing housing values. And then I think about Aspen and what has happened there in terms of the fact that all the worker bees live somewhere out there,
Sure.
far away, and they get the bus in. And I didn't hear anything here that really addressed the issue of having affordable housing. And yeah, I heard you're talking about next housing, so you're going to take a single-use housing, you're going to create these apartments. Well, my son was in Palo Alto, California. He had a 800
A non-affordable place. It's
800 square foot apartment, $4,000 a month.
Sure. So
So
the question
what do
is,
you-
really about,
Would you please address that?
yeah.
Sure, so, you're right, by state law, we cannot mandate affordable housing.
Stand up.
You got it.
Sorry guys, I'm gonna try to get this mic working here. Very good job.
Thank you. So, by state law, we cannot mandate affordable housing to be provided, which we may have a chance to invest in inclusionary housing, or require inclusionary housing moving forward. That would be a local decision. However, you're right. Really what we are doing is addressing the problem by requiring a greater variety of housing so that there's at least workforce housing issues addressed, perhaps maybe not traditional affordable housing where you're building housing to meet 60% of area median income or 80% or 100%. But with that said, the one thing that is unique about Bend is that we are the only city in the state that has an affordable housing fee. And so with every building permit, residential building permit that's pulled, I think it's 1/5 of 1% of the value is paid to the city, and we have a revolving fund that we have been using, and it's been used to leverage over 600 units of affordable housing over the past 10 years. And so it's going to be tough. It's going to require us to bridge not only the housing mix that we're requiring, but perhaps some inclusionary zoning requirements. We'll have the ability with the expansion areas to perhaps through annexation agreements require a certain percentage of affordable housing. We got through the analysis part of the UGB to, I would call it more the beauty pageant phase of it, where folks who wanted to come in were offering everything that they thought the community would want. And we did have at least 2 or 3 property owners who pledged. Four property owners who pledged very significant amounts of affordable housing at very low area median income levels. So we're getting there, but yeah, you're right. It's a tough equation to work out.
We have a lot of questions, and we had considered maybe leading us all in a discussion about this one up here. Would you rather talk about this or ask your own questions? You're all saying ask your own questions. And I think there was, one of you over here was, yep, go ahead.
So regarding the biking to the classes and whatnot, and I'm a big advocate of biking. I bike here today, bike all over. However, in the wintertime, I use studded tires. And if you don't have studded tires, it's a huge risk. So let's just say that, I don't know, 50% of the student populace is biking, and that's keeping it in the range it needs to be, so there's adequate parking for people that have to drive. What happens during that 4 or 5 months of the year where it's icy and snowy? Do you guys have plans on keeping certain primary paths really well plowed immediately at 6 a.m. in the morning, sanded gravel, whatever must be done? Or are you going to supply these people with $100 studded tires? How are we going to accommodate for that winter season?
Well, that is one of the biggest questions we're probably addressing in the next few months here as our cold weather came in this weekend, right? So one of the things I know is that we're going to promote transit here, and then starting November 1st. Maybe it needs to start a little sooner as it got colder. But the goal is, if you've been biking, maybe you'll be willing to jump on the bus for these winter months. So really trying to promote that. we're going to do a challenge on campus and, you know, prizes and competitions and things to make that a little more fun and hopefully encourage more transit riders. But from a, you know, studded tire perspective, probably not planning to go there at this point. But, you know, really, I think ideally if we could work with the city, I know their maintenance department is, you know, pretty limited, but my goal is to focus on a particular corridor or corridors that we know are pretty well heavily traveled by bicyclists, maybe a Century Drive and a nice east-west connection, and so that those cyclists can continue to ride as long as possible, and then, you know, and then combining that with a bus or a bike-to-bus option as well, hopefully encouraging that to tomorrow. CET will be on campus and showing people how to get their bikes on the bus, so just trying to make those connections.
Just a word of note, so I've used various studded tires and some of them work extremely well, to the point where I can bike and look for black ice and totally secure on it.
Nice.
If you had enough people biking and they were interested in it, maybe you could use some buying power to you know, at no cost to you, offer people tires as an option, because they really do. If you have good ones, it's amazing what you can
Great.
do.
If you don't mind hanging around, I'll take the name of those ones that work. That'd be great.
And you had your hand up from the very beginning.
Complete communities elsewhere, not in the new UGB expansion, but basically the whole east side, which is our suburban sprawl zone where the more affordable housing is. How are we going to make those develop complete communities so that we don't have to drive to the forum?
So it's always tough to retrofit, but I would say the biggest opportunity, sorry, I'm chasing you around here. This is the Ward property. These 9 crosshatched areas are called opportunity areas. This number 7 is an opportunity area. I think it's almost wholly owned by the Ward family. And the idea and the uses that are planned for it really do emphasize commercial, office, employment. There's going to be a high school there as well. So if you look at our zoning map, yellow is residential. This whole area is just one big sea of yellow. You'll actually have some different commercial zoning districts applied to that land moving forward that would hopefully provide the opportunity for folks to get some of those services met without having to get all the way up to 27th to Safeway or having to come to the west side to hit a different store. But point well taken. It's really tough to retrofit suburban cul-de-sac type development. I think we're fortunate to have some relatively large tracts of land in Southeast that we have the opportunity to kind of shift the uses around and take a different approach. And they are required through the UGB to develop in a mixed use manner.
3rd Street redevelopment to make it, you know, that a hub for the neighborhoods behind it.
3rd Street,
The current.
the corridor.
Yeah. Redevelopment.
You know, so we do have central area plan, and so 3rd Street is a part of that. Yet another opportunity site where we are allowing and encouraging more of that urban style development, residential above office and retail and commercial. So, you know, I don't know how long it will be for that to pop, so to speak. I do know that the Ward family has been in and is in discussions about what to do with their property. You just have a wider collection of property owners here, and it's, in my experience, what I've seen, large properties that are under the control of one entity tend to develop quicker than larger areas that are owned by a collection of folks. But the policy direction and the development code regulations are in place for 3rd Street to redevelop as well.
John, same thing for Greenwood going east.
Greenwood, yep, heading east out to a little past 8th. So yeah, all these crosshatched areas are opportunity areas. Some are going to be more urban in development than others.